to start off by congratulating our friends in Spain and Argentina. And I don't say that easily, especially for the Spanish bit. But anyway, sometimes we have to say things. All right, good afternoon. Very shortly, I will be joined here by our Special Advisor on Africa, Cristina Duarte, along with the Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, Claver Gatete. They will be here to discuss the ministerial meeting on Africa Day at the high-level political forum that is taking place today, the HPLF, which is ongoing today. Tomorrow, I will be joined by Alvaro Lario, the president of IFAD, which, as you all know, is the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and he is also the chair of UN Water. And he will also be joined by Federico Properzi, the chief and technical lead of UN Water. They will be here to launch the first ever UN system-wide strategy for water and sanitation and unveil the latest figures from the upcoming State of Food Security and Nutrition 2024 report. Our Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed will travel to West Africa as part of a wider effort to engage at a country level to support the acceleration and implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And this follows the SDG summit that took place in September. She leaves tonight. Her first stop will be in Dakar in Senegal. From there, she will travel to Guinea and Mali. From Mali, the Deputy Secretary General will then head to Ethiopia to preside over the opening of the first session of the Preparatory Committee for the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. From Ethiopia, the Deputy Secretary General will return to West Africa to continue the second leg of her mission. She will start in Burkina Faso and continue on to Niger before concluding her mission in Nigeria. During the visit, the Deputy Secretary General will hold meetings with senior government officials, UN entities on the ground, and other stakeholders to take stock of the challenges affecting the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals, the review of the UN's presence, and support to the SDGs in these varied environments, and identify ways to strengthen impact for people on the ground. Turning to the situation in Gaza, I think you all heard a rather extensive briefing from our friend Scott Anderson, the head of UNRWA in Gaza. I can further tell you that we and our humanitarian partners continue to assist families who are being displaced from northern Gaza to areas in the south. A team from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs carried out a mission today aimed at supporting the scaling up of services at points where families fleeing northern Gaza or arriving in the south. Furthermore, our humanitarian partners are registering displaced people so that support can be provided to them whenever they seek shelter south of Wadi Gaza. We're also planning missions to areas south of Saladin Road to assess the people's need in that area. OCHA says that with each new evacuation directive, families in Gaza are being forced to make impossible choices, stay amid active hostilities, or flee to areas with little space or services, and of course no guarantee of safety, as we saw this weekend. OCHA also says the horrors witnessed in recent days only underscore what we have said repeatedly over the past 9 months. There is no safe place in Gaza, not shelters, not hospitals, and not the so-called humanitarian zones. We call yet again on all parties to this conflict to respect their obligations under international humanitarian law. They must take constant care to spare civilians and civilian objects. This includes ensuring safe passage for those who flee, and wherever they are in Gaza, civilians must receive the essential they need to survive: food, shelter, and health care. Making sure civilians in Gaza get the life-saving support they need means ensuring safe and unimpeded humanitarian operations. Turning to Hurricane Beryl, we have an update from our colleagues in Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Jamaica. 2 weeks since the hurricane's first impact, our teams in the three islands continue to work with authorities to complete needs assessments In Jamaica, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the World Food Programme, and the UN Disaster Assessment and Coordination Arm are assessing the damage to homes, which is that assessment is expected to wrap up shortly. In Grenada and St. Vincent's and the Grenadines, humanitarian teams have identified restoring water supplies and the provision of sanitation services as top priorities. We and our partners will continue to support these countries through the recently launched response plan, which seeks $9 million in funding and aims to help 43,000 out of the 82,000 people potentially impacted by this storm. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues on the ground are telling us that attacks today and over the weekend continue to impact civilians in frontline areas. Authorities said that on Saturday, an attack on a railway in the Kharkiv region of eastern Ukraine caused nearly 30 civilian casualties, including children. A second attack reportedly killed 2 first responders who had rushed to help. Local authorities and humanitarian partners on the ground say the strikes are also damaged scores of civilian buildings as well as railway infrastructure. Heavy fighting also continued in the Donetsk region. In the town of Mirnohrad, multiple strikes killed and injured civilians, including a child, and caused damage to civilian infrastructures. Aid workers are mobilized to assist people impacted by these attacks. And turning to the Central African Republic, our peacekeeping colleagues there report that a joint delegation from the UN and government officials, that includes on the UN and it includes our representative on the ground, Valentin Rugwabiza. They visited Obo and Bambuti on Saturday. They were there to assess the efforts undertaken to help restore a semblance of normal life in the Ombumbu prefecture following an escalation of violence between armed groups that had been taking place there since February. The visit came 2 months after the deployment of UN peacekeepers to Bambuti, a town in the far east of the Central African Republic on the border with South Sudan, an isolated area where national defense and security forces are absent. The deployment of the UN force, carried out in parallel with the ongoing rehabilitation of the Bambuti-Obo-Bangasu road, done by peacekeepers, is progressively opening up the area. The majority of localities in that prefecture are now accessible, allowing for the free movement of goods and people. During the visit, a road was inaugurated, work was launched to drill boreholes to help supply the area with drinking water, and the foundation stone for the town hall was laid to enable the mayor to resume her activities in the area after a 2-year absence, marking the return of state authority. In total, the UN mission, with the participation of our country team, has launched 13 projects which have been identified to rapidly address the basic humanitarian needs of local families, to reestablish the presence of state authority, and to reconnect with the rest of the country. A couple of personnel announcements. I just want to read into the record what we announced earlier today, which is we have a new special representative of the Secretary General for Iraq. Mohammed Al-Hassan of the Sultanate of Oman was appointed as the Secretary General's new special representative for Iraq and head of the UN assistance mission there. He succeeds Janine Hennis-Plasschaert of the Netherlands, to whom the Secretary General is grateful for her services. And as you know, she is now our special coordinator in Lebanon. Mr. Al-Hassan brings to the position a broad range of diplomatic experiences with careers spanning over 30 years, working on preventive diplomacy, peace building, and development. And you all know him from his recently current post as the permanent representative of Oman to the United Nations. We also have a new special resident coordinator in Guinea-Bissau. Secretary General has appointed Geneviève Boutin of Canada as the RC in Guinea-Bissau. She starts work today following the approval from the government. She brings more than 20 years of experience in development and humanitarian work and peace building and child rights work. She previously served as deputy director in UNICEF's program group and other leadership positions at UNICEF. She's worked in OCHA and other places, and we congratulate her. And today's World Youth Skills Day. In the message, the Secretary General said this day shines a spotlight on skills for peace and sustainable development, adding that young people around the world can make a bigger difference for our shared future, such as green and digital economies, education, and so much more. And perhaps this is more. Thank you, sir. Okay, that's it. Your turn, Edie.
Thank you, Steph. First, does the Secretary General have any comment on the latest Israeli airstrikes in Gaza?
Well, I mean, you know, I feel we're repeating ourselves at our call to halt the conflict, at our condemnations of civilians being hit. We would like to see the ongoing discussions on the ceasefire bear fruit as quickly as possible.
And does the Secretary General have any comment on the Houthis' apparent latest attack on a ship?
Again, I think we've clearly condemned these attacks on civilian targets in the Red Sea and in the broader area, which has an impact not only, of course, on those ships being targeted, but on the global economy as a whole.
And lastly, you made an announcement of a new SRSG for Iraq. Are we going to get an announcement soon about a replacement for Martin Griffiths?
It depends if you use the UN definition of soon or the Oxford English Dictionary edition meaning of soon. Ibtisam.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on Edith's question. I mean, do you condemn the killing of Palestinian civilians by Israel in Gaza?
Yes, and we have so since the beginning.
But why is it that your statement doesn't say that clearly compared to your statement a week ago or something when it came to Ukraine?
I think I mean, listen, you can argue that we have not been clear. I feel for our point, we have been clear as possible when speaking about the situation there.
I have another question. I just would like to clarify something because I was a little confused after the briefing today in the morning. So the UN opposed its operation regarding the American pier after June 8th Israeli rescue operation for 4 hostages that killed also 270 Palestinians. And if I am correct, remember, you have also some investigation going on there regarding that issue. Can you clarify that? Because today, yeah.
Yeah, my understanding is that there is an investigation going on. I'll try to get you a bit more detail. Deji, happy Monday.
Happy Monday. First, I have a personal thing to ask. I received this letter from UNRWA USA, said your donations to Gaza are under attack. Basically, it tells the lawsuits we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and they are asking for the donation for the USA's legal fund. So I'm just curious. Can you clarify whether UNRWA would allocate some of the donations to this, what they call legal fund, to fight the legal case?
I think that question should be asked of UNRWA USA, which is independent from the Secretariat. So I can't speak to what they're sending you.
Okay. So, but basically, they ask for donation for this legal fund, which means the money we donated before, that would go to
as I said, I think you need to ask them that question.
Okay. Second, I know, this question will go to this briefing about the Trump assassination attempt. I'm not going to ask that because we know that Secretary General has already put out the statement. For the past few years, we saw Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister Robert Fico, and now former President Donald Trump. How does the Secretary General seen this kind of political violence on the rising for the past few years?
I think what it shows is that very few countries are immune to political violence. And I think what we have seen in recent years is not only the more visible attacks that you've mentioned, whether the one on former President Trump or the others that we have seen, but I think all of you are pretty plugged into what is being said on social media. We've seen a rise in rhetorical violence, verbal violence, and in many countries you see legislators and local elected officials also reporting a level of personal threat and personal violence, which is extremely worrying for any democracy or frankly for any country.
And one last question also concerning this, the news. New York Post, in the beginning of their coverage, they said the shooter identified as a Chinese man, actually, which is wrong. They posted that online for a couple of hours. It might be an error, but how do you think this could also, like before the more clear version of this report came out, how would this impact, different people?
Look, I think I was a journalist many years ago, thankfully not in the day and age of Twitter and social media. And I think journalists have a responsibility on breaking news to ensure that the reporting is fact-based. And we also saw, I think over the last 48 hours, a huge amount also of disinformation, in which social media companies, as in any case of disinformation, have a responsibility. Okay, any questions online? I will go get our guests then. Thank you very much. Stay put, don't move.
Thank you. Hi. Good morning. Good afternoon, actually.
Great, please. Oh, sorry. Grab a seat, guys. Grab seats in the back. Please, please. The water is fresh if you want to help yourself. Great. Good afternoon. We are delighted to be here to mark the ministerial meeting on Africa Day, which is going on the HLPF right now. And we are joined by Cristina Duarte, the Secretary General Special Advisor on Africa. And she is joined by Claver Gatete, the newly appointed Executive Director for the UN Economic Commission on Africa. First time at the briefing, so we welcome you, sir, and we give you the floor first, and then we'll go to Ms. Duarte. Please.
Thank you very much. Really, it is an honor to be here, especially on this Africa Day, when we are here just for the high-level political forum and also discussing the Summit of the Future, because we are here to look for solutions for Africa. Africa has already, as you know, it has its own vision. In addition to the SDG achievements for 2030, it also has the Agenda 2063. And this year was the beginning of the 10-year program implementation of the Agenda 2063, which is very critical. But it is happening at a time when Africa is facing very serious challenges. One, we have conflicts. You know the Sahel, it's what is going on. We have had coup d'etats. We have Sudan. We have the whole North Africa that is also affected. But at the same time, it is one of the biggest challenges that we have ever seen in our lifetime because of the high indebtedness of the African countries. After the COVID where many other countries borrowed not for development but also for saving lives, it became even worse because from 2010 to 2022, the debt increased by 192%. That's the highest ever. Right now, African countries are paying 163 billion per year. And of course, when I say 163 billion per year, they are also the debt stock itself is 1.1 trillion, which is very serious. That means that actually by paying the debt, you have no room or very little room to now implement the SDGs, to now implement what is required for the next 10-year program of the African Union, and this is becoming now a challenge. The financing is also becoming a problem, especially the concessional resources that are long-term in nature, that are cheaper. It's very, very difficult to access those kind of resources. And that's why really finding a solution through the reform of the global financing system becomes very urgent and very, very important. There's no room now left for countries that are very much squeezed to implement their own agenda. There is also the big problem of the climate. The climate is costing the African continent 5% of their GDP. Actually, last year for Mozambique, it was 15% because they had a cyclone. So combining now the climate, where you see so much of the drought, so much of the floods happening, and with no resources, the solutions are becoming now almost impossible. We are, as the ECA, we are helping them to really structure their green bonds, the blue bonds, but we need investors in those kind of bonds or sustainability-linked bonds. But at the same time, what has become very serious, because they are looking for alternative, they started now selling carbon. And the carbon credit market is really not in the favor of the Africans. They are now negotiating with people who are experienced, who are purchasing carbon at over $100 per ton in Europe, in North America, and elsewhere. But in Africa, it's less than sometimes less than $5 per ton. You can imagine the gap. So we are assisting them to find a system to have the registries that are assisting them really to be able to negotiate properly, if I may call it that way. Because at that point, we have done it for the Congo Basin Initiative. We have done it for the, we are now doing it for the island states. And now we are projecting that we also need to take on the countries in the West, in the Sahel. So they are facing a lot of problems in terms of debt, in terms of financing, and also in terms of the climate. And that's why the Summit of the Future is so critical, especially the reform of the international financial architecture, the financing for development conference preparatory meeting that is taking place next week in Addis Ababa is going to become very critical, where we discuss the challenges, where we discuss the solutions as we move to Spain next year, in mid-next year, to discuss really and take decisions on the financing for development. There are also, of course, social security problems, because if you don't have enough resources to finance the social safety net, it becomes also a very serious problem. And that's why the social summit next year is also going to become very useful. So we are here at an opportune moment where we can now, this time, we know the reality. We know that it's not good. We know that also the implementation of the SDGs is also not really going very well. And that's why we are saying we need more resources. We need a relief in terms of the debt, but also we need to understand what we do to address the issues of climate, which is affecting almost everyone. So there are many I could say, but for now, maybe I can stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Christina, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We are here because African member states are reporting on SDGs. High-level political forum is a reporting moment. And as my dear colleague, West Chikatet, mentioned, Africa, from an SDG implementation standpoint, is off track. Only 12% of the 140 targets have been delivered. And he mentioned, in a very summarized way, the Africa's challenge: debt, climate, fiscal space. I would add policy space. I do believe that we reach a point that we need to understand the root causes of these problems. So we surf the wave toward a solution, a structural solution. And any conversation around SDG off track and all the problems that my dear colleague Kateti mentioned, in my opinion, has to do with something: lack of resilience. Africa, so far, has been able to build resilience to a level that puts Africa in a position to deliver the SDGs in a sustainable way. MDGs have not been delivered, meaning Africa has not delivered resilience. This is the reason that basically together, OSA and ECA, we have been trying to deliver a narrative focused on three main axes. In one of them, maybe the most important one, is financing for development. We have been very clear: to deliver sustainable development, Africa needs to tackle a node sustainable financing. Africa needs to look inside and start understanding that the driver of financing for development should come inside. Resilience, the only way to build resilience. This is the reason that we have in the room three outstanding young Africans with us today. And I would like to take the opportunity to introduce them. Monica Malitz is a refugee youth leader. And Monica's commitment to education and advocacy has been outstanding. Monica, these three Africans with us in the room, they have a common denominator. They have been under very struggling situations, and out of these struggling situations, they have been able to craft their own path to success, which means to resilience. And they are three life examples that resilience can be built, yes, in the African continent. Besides the short-term solutions that are available, SDR's allocation, the need to create liquidity facilities to address the huge deficit in terms of fiscal space in Africa, I do believe that at the same time Africa needs to start tackling long-term solutions. And for me, debt is an example. Africa is in debt distress, as we have been saying, but not because it's over indebtedness. No. I think we need to change that narrative. Africa is in debt distress. Data is there, cannot negate. But because Africa does not control its own economic and financial flows. Why? Weak country systems and weak institutions. It's time to start paying attention to intangible assets, as important assets to deliver development. The second one is Vitor. Vitor is, among other things, is a warrior, is a fighter, but is a UN Goodwill Ambassador and member of the UNHCR Global Advisory Group, and there's also a quite amazing journey from resilience to success. And we have with us Victoria, that has been recently appointed chair of the United Nations Voluntary Trust Fund Board for 2024. They are here in this room because they will be available to your questions, not only me and my dear brother Katet, but also these three young, resilient African voices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take some questions. Gabriel, please, Al Jazeera. And then.
Hello. Thank you very much for the briefing to both of you. My name is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English News Channel. African countries make up about 30% of the entire UN membership, right? about 28%, if I'm not mistaken. But security issues in Africa often dominate the Security Council when it comes to issues of the Security Council historically. How do you see that dynamic playing out, particularly under we're seeing more countries in Africa wanting UN blue helmets out of their country? Can you just talk about that dynamic there?
Please, one by one. Yeah, no, one question. Yeah, one by one on the questions, please.
Thank you very much. Let me just start by saying that insecurity is not made in Africa. And wherever you see that where there is a conflict, you always find a developed country being part of that kind of conflict. And then it also goes with the reform that we are talking about, especially with the Security Council. And you find that for every conflict on the African continent, the pen holder is not an African country. They are the ones that lead on this one here in terms of what needs to be done. At the same time, they are, in most cases, also linked to the colonial side of the event. So there are many issues that are contained there. And that's why for the first time, we used to see the coup d'etats which were being blamed, but now we are seeing certain element which is not very clear, where people are happy, when actually coup d'etats are not encouraged. And it means that you have to go back and address the root causes of really what is causing that kind of conflict. It's not just that a society will wake up or and then start a conflict. And there are interrelationship. There are some which are security related, which are political related, also governance related. There are others which are poverty related. There are many factors, but also you'll find both African countries and non-African countries also embedded in that kind of conflict, one way or the other. And that's why it is very, very important for every conflict not to take it across the board, say, African problem, because each one is different. What is taking place in the, for example, North Africa, for example, Sudan, or the Horn of Africa, is not the same thing as West Africa in the Sahel, because if you look at the Sahel and where the problem started, you can trace it all the way, and there are many things which are interconnected into that. So there is nothing like is similar from one country to another, to another, to another. There are many elements that are included in that. Yeah.
Thank you. Please.
I will take the next one.
You will take the next one. Amélie, please.
For a question of time.
Yeah.
Amélie Bottelier from AFP News Agency. This high-level forum is taking place a few weeks before the Summit of the Future now. Regarding Africa, what would you want to see in the Pact of the Future, which some people don't see as ambitious as would be needed? So what would you want to see regarding Africa so that this pact is ambitious enough for the future African people?
Thank you very much for your question about the Summit of the Future. In a couple of minutes, I will exactly deliver a keynote in a webinar about the Summit of the Future and Africa. I do believe that it's important for everybody, particularly for the international community, to acknowledge that Africa does not land in the Summit of the Future arena with empty pockets. This is critical. Africa has a vision. Africa has a strategy to deliver the vision, and Africa has a log frame, a clear log frame to deliver the strategy, and has been able to translate it in a 10-year implementation plans. Meaning that Africa, as far as the Summit of the Future is concerned, is not what we are going to take from the Summit of the Future, but how is that an opportunity, the Summit of the Future, to bring Africa's vision, specificities, and to influence the correlation of forces in the geopolitical arena. Because I don't think the Summit of the Future will be the one to define Africa's vision, because this is clear. Of course, the 5 chapters of the Pact of the Future are incredible related to the Agenda 2063. Financing for development, where Africa advocates for a shift of paradigm. Peace and security, what is clear in the agenda that there is only one way to deliver durable peace, is by delivering development. If we move to, for example, youth and next generations, it is clear for African and for African policy makers that in the next 25 years, young population in Africa will be growing by 73%, and the rest of the world only by 6%. So the epicenter of demographic evolution will be in Africa, working population, labor market, etc., etc. Of course, for that to happen, then you have the last chapter, global governance, and this is what my dear colleague Katet mentioned. There is the strong Secretary General's response in terms or narrative in terms of the need to change the international financial architecture to make it more fitable from a development standpoint. But I do believe that it's clear that Africa and African member states are more than ready to land on Summit of the Future with clear ideas, clear proposals, and to craft a place in the geopolitical arena that Africa deserves as a global player.
Maybe if I can
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know that for the Summit of the Future, there are 5 areas. One of them is the reform of the global financial architecture. And that one is very, very important, for example, when you talk about debt on the African continent, especially access to the concessional financing. Now, African countries, most of them, they are really in trouble in terms of accessing these resources because you cannot go on the market. In Africa, out of the 54 countries, you find 21 countries are not even rated. And then we only have 2 investment-grade countries. That's Mauritius and Botswana. The others, meaning that if you go to the market, you cannot get a good return. You cannot borrow from the market. You have to borrow at a very high cost. And the alternative is now to borrow in the country. And if you do that, you'll crowd out the private sector. Now, you don't have much alternative, especially. We know some countries who are paying 60% of their budget, paying for debt. And this is not really sustainable. It's not acceptable, it's not sustainable, and there must be a solution. So that's why a good discussion and identifying these kind of issues is something that is very useful for the international community to understand that we need to do things differently. We need to find a solution. We know that, of course, the G20 common framework is not working. It has some issues, and it's not solving all the problems. We need to reform it. We need to find a solution, as we used to have during the HIPIC initiative. And the issue now of the SDGs, yes, very good to talk about SDGs. Okay, if you don't have fiscal space, where do you get the money? After paying the loan, how much is left to cater for the rest? We'll be deceiving ourselves. And then also, how do you finance education? How do you finance health? We have over 57 countries in Africa, 57% really paying more on debt than education and health itself. Now, if you look at this situation, is this sustainable? Can we talk about the SDGs? That means there is something that we need to fix for us, because African countries need like 1.3 trillion per year to address the issues of SDGs. But how much are they getting? All the money that they have is now going to pay the debt. So those kind of issues and the financing, they are all interrelated, and this is an issue that we need to solve, because otherwise you'd have most countries defaulting. And if they default, they also affect the international financial system. The issues of agenda for peace, really this is indicating that we need to do something different. Peace is not just sending peacekeepers, but at the same time we need to look at the issue of peace building, where you can prevent, rather than just waiting for the crisis to happen and then send peacekeepers and then discuss the resources needed and all that. No, we can prevent. And that's where you can put more emphasis to really address some of the issues. The Global Digital Compact, I was a co-facilitator before I left my job on the Global Digital Compact. Technology is the future in everything, in every way of life, whether it is development, whether it is social, whether it is everything, it's everything. And then among the 2.6 billion who are not connected, really Africa has the highest. Africa is now 37% connected to internet. And so you can imagine we need it way more. And then the artificial intelligence is now driving the countries in terms of growth, and that's where Africa is also lagging far behind. And we are saying the first thing first, let's be connected. We talk about it. We need infrastructure, where you need broadband, you need satellite, and also you need connectivity. But who does that? Who finances that? How do we prioritize Africa so that they also play a role in terms of development? That one is another problem. The future generation, now we cannot do anything without the youth. Especially they are the ones who are highly connected. And for us to have sustainable development, not to have problems in the future, the youth have to be included. You can no longer avoid them. They are part of the society, and that's the only way you can move from one generation to another. So we believe that this summit is really exposing many things. At least it's having people together to discuss it, and then once we come up with a pact of the future, at least there will be some key elements that people can start on, not only implementing, but also they are also feeding into other processes that are coming next year, especially the financing for development. But I wanted just to go back one point that my sister mentioned here, that in terms of sustainability, somehow you need to help the countries to develop their domestic resource mobilization. And once we fix it, the illicit financial flows that we are talking about, the application of technology for the taxation and other things, now, the money which is leaking outside, this time we can reduce it significantly. Africa loses about 86 billion per year in terms of illicit financial flows. So you can imagine this is not sustainable. Even for the little money that we have, it's leaking. And now, if you also add it to the 15.8% of the tax to GDP ratio, which is the lowest anywhere, really you find that there's not much room for African countries to make progress in terms of financing their own development. So assisting them in terms of domestic resource mobilization, but also developing the capital market, which provides long-term resources for the private sector, is something that is very helpful, that can help the countries this time to be on their own feet and grow their own economies. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. Just Monica Grayley will be here now to brief you on behalf of the PGA. And thank you very much to our guests.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Steph. I will start today with a trip announcement for you. The President of the General Assembly, Mr. Dennis Francis, will undertake official visit to the Republic of Singapore from 18 to 19 July. During his stay, the PGA is scheduled to hold bilateral meetings with key leaders of Singapore, including President, His Excellency Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, His Excellency Mr. Lawrence Wong, and Minister for Foreign Affairs, Her Excellency Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan. His itinerary also includes site visits to Marina Barrage, Punggol Regional Library, Singapore Council of Women's Organizations, and the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation, and Sustainable Development. Additionally, the PGA will participate in a roundtable dialogue at the St. Rajaratnam School of International Studies with members of the academic community in Singapore. As acknowledgement of Singapore's leadership of the Forum of Small States, the visit highlights the critical role that small states play in the multilateral system and their contributions to the work program of the United Nations, including in addressing global challenges such as climate change and sea level rise. Throughout his engagements, the PGA will also discuss the importance of digital inclusivity and access and how rapid digital transformations can be leveraged to achieve our collective goals of peace, progress, prosperity, and sustainability, ensuring no one is left behind. The PJ's delegation includes his chef de cabinet, an advisor to the Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs team, a communications advisor, and a security officer. Travel costs for the visit to Singapore are jointly covered by the OPJ's Trust Fund and the government of the Republic of Singapore. The President of the General Assembly condemns the attack against the Al-Mawasi area near Khan Yunis in the southwest of Gaza on Saturday, which killed over 90 people and left hundreds injured. The PJ reiterated his call for the immediate end of violence in the region and a diplomatic solution to this conflict. The PGA is shocked and distressed at the attempted assassination of the former President Donald Trump during a campaign speech over the weekend in the city of Butler in the state of Pennsylvania. The PGA says that whether in domestic or international politics, violence and hostility have no place in the conduct of political affairs. It is in the nature of life and of politics that we have differing views and opinions about fundamental issues affecting people. Such differences, however, ought never to make us enemies of our neighbors and interlocutors. On behalf of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Mr. Francis wishes President Trump a full and speedy recovery and equally speedy return to the former president's activities on the hustings. The GA president also would like to express his deepest condolences to the family of Mr. Corey Comparatori, who lost his life on Saturday. The PJ wishes a speedy recovery to the people who were injured during that tragic event. And this morning, President Francis addressed the high-level segment of the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, and the opening of the ministerial segment of high-level political forum in the General Assembly Hall. This year, the theme is reinforcing the 2030 agenda and eradicating poverty in times of multiple crises, the effective delivery of sustainable, resilient, and innovative solutions. The PJ stressed the need for accelerated action to implement the Sustainable Development Goals for people and planet. He said that the theme leads to the urgency of finding sustainable, resilient, and innovative solutions that would enable us to effectively deliver on our 2030 commitments, because deliver we must. Only 70% of the 17 global goals are on track. More on the PJ's speech on his website. I have two more notes for you. President Francis chaired an informal meeting of the G8 to celebrate the Nelson Mandela International Day, which is marked every year on 18th July. In his opening remarks, the PJ stated that Mandela's visionary leadership not only brought an end to apartheid, but also continues to resonate and inspire us today, constantly remind us that he, Mandela, stood for them, still stands despite his demise. Mr. Francis highlighted that Madiba's ensuring legacy left an indelible mark around the world and is a testament to the profound positive impact of humanity's good deeds when we opt to be our best of being. Still on the Nelson Mandela's Day, the PJ wrote a letter to member states inviting the diplomatic community to participate in the traditional Nelson Mandela International Day public service activity, which will take place on 18th July, so this Thursday, from 1:30 to 4 p.m. in the on the Randall's Island, or I should say Randall's Island in New York City. The event is co-organized by the New York City Mayor's Office for International Affairs, the UN Department for Global Communications, Office of the President of the General Assembly, of course, the Permanent Mission of South Africa to the UN, and in partnership with the Randall's Park Alliance. And more information on the PJ's website. Last but not least, President Francis recorded a video on the World Youth Skills Day, which was marked today. According to the UN, the world has around 1.2 billion young people, or 16% of the population aged between 15 and 24 years. Mr. Francis believes that their engagement is vital for driving innovation and sustainable solutions. The PJ says that empowering youth is not just a moral imperative, it is a strategic investment in our shared future. On this World Youth Skills Day, he is urging member states, the UN system, and all stakeholders, private sector, civil society, among others, to strengthen efforts in supporting youth. And more on this speech also on our website. So this is everything I have for today. Do you have anything else? How are you, Amélie? Good to see you here. Welcome back.
Thanks, Monica. Sorry if this question was already asked, as I was away for a few weeks. Is there already a provisional list of speakers for high-level week?
Yeah, I have good news for you, and thank you also for your message. In fact, the list was published on Friday by our colleagues in the JCM. So as soon as we finish here, I will send to everybody. So you have, of course, the preliminary list. As we all know, we know the drill every year. Yeah, there will be, of course, this list is subject to changes, but you'll receive, or we send to you the updated list every time it changes. Anything else here or on the screen? If not, I would say have a wonderful lunch this afternoon. I'll see you next week. Thank you. Thanks.